All right. Mrs. Oulson's back on the stand. You're still under oath. I'll tell her that in front of the jury, though. Are we ready?
Ready for jury trial?
Yes. Oh, really, Emily? Good. You guys are good. Coordination.
Jurors in the courtroom, Your Honor.
Thank you. You can be seated. Thank you. Were you all able to abide by my instructions during the recess? All righty, then we'll get started again. Mrs. Oulson is still on the stand, and you're still under oath. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Martin.
Before the break, we were at that period in time that the man behind you had left.
Yes.
And you and Mr. Oulson were in the theater, and we were talking about what was going on while the man was gone. And I want to discuss with you, was there any conversation or comments made by Mr. Oulson after the man left that would suggest to you that Mr. Oulson had any sort of animosity at that time that would result in him acting out in any way?
He did not say anything, no.
You're going to have to talk up a little bit.
He did not say anything, no.
Could you tell whether or not he was sitting there fuming and being agitated? You know your husband, so.
Right. No, he seemed to be back to normal. We thought it was over.
Was, as the gentleman went down the stairs and you saw go downstairs, your husband, did he make any comments about, derogatory comments about the man walking down the stairs that's going to go complain about him?
No.
The man's gone for about 3 minutes. We've discussed what happened during that time period. Did you become aware when the man returns?
Yes.
How did you become aware of it?
Again, he's behind us, and he makes a statement.
Okay. Before that statement is made, do you see the man coming up the aisles that we?
Not that I recall paying any attention, no.
Okay. You were focused on waiting for that man to come back?
No.
To your knowledge, did your husband make any statements to you that would lead you to believe that he was focused and waiting for the man to come back?
No statements.
All right. Let's get to the point where the individual has returned, as you indicated that there was something said. We're going to break it down as much as we can to try to put it in a proper time frame and sequence. All right. So at some point in time, the same voice that you heard, that man said something.
Yes.
Let's start there. What was said?
He says, "I see you put your phone away now that I went to get management."
Words to that
Not
effect.
verbatim, right, but words to that.
And was the phone away?
Yes, it was totally away.
Out of your peripheral vision, since Mr. Oulson is sitting right next to you, do you sense, feel, or see any type of body movement by Mr. Oulson that would indicate that he would be turning to his right and focused on activity that was to his right?
Not at this point of time.
before I'm talking about before the statement is made.
Right, no.
Do you recall any type of body movement whatsoever by your husband before that statement is made?
No.
Did your husband make any statement to that man before that statement was made?
No.
Now we have the statement made. Does your husband respond?
He does, yes.
And how does he respond?
Again, with what's your problem? Like,
Anything else?
I know we're feeling, why is this continuing going on? But no, I don't think any other, that was more of a my feeling. And his statement was just, what is your problem? Like,
All right. Was there any cussing by your husband?
no,
Any F-bombs by your husband?
no,
The man behind you, was that man cussing?
no,
Any F-bombs, threats by the man behind?
no.
Okay. When the individual made the statement about words to the effect, I see you put your phone away, I'm just paraphrasing a little bit. Comparing that statement when he made it as far as the tone and the demeanor of that statement, had that changed at all from the first 3 times that individual made contact with your husband?
No, it was not a nice statement.
When your husband responded to the statement, words to the effect, see you put your phone away, at that point, did he turn in his seat? Towards where the voice was coming from?
During that statement?
No,
I'm sorry.
after the statement was made.
Oh, after the statement was made, yes.
All right, I'm asking you, once the statement was made, did your husband turn towards the direction where that voice was coming from?
Oh, no. No, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
All right, now we have those two, the statement made and the response based on the tone and the demeanor of the voices that you heard. What were you thinking?
Why is this still going on? The phone was away. This should be over.
Did you sense at that point that the demeanor of both your husband and the man behind you was somewhat similar as far as either agitation or whatever you want to call it? Was your husband frustrated at that point?
I would say so. I'd say they both were, yes.
All right. Say they were both angry at that point?
Fair statement, yes.
All right. You were there, listening to it. Think they were mad at each other?
Probably, yes.
Both of them?
Yes, both of them.
Do you recall any type of statement by your husband about texting?
Yes, I do.
In relation to the statements that we have, see your phone away, when did that take place?
After he returned from getting management, and he stated, I see you put your phone away now, that I went to get management. Chad again said, what is your problem? And he did state that he was checking on a message about his daughter.
we're going to take this real slow, okay? So now we have that statement, right?
Yes.
Does there come a point in time when your husband begins to change his position in the seat?
Yes.
Okay. Is that turning around and looking or beginning to stand up?
Beginning to stand up.
At that point in time, did you know where your husband's cell phone was?
I did not see it, but I assumed it was still in his hand.
Either as your husband was standing up or after he stood up, did your husband make any other statements?
Not that I recall, no.
As your husband was standing up, what were you doing?
I noticed him standing up, so I started to stand up a little behind him.
All right. Well, as soon as he started to stand, you started to stand. Why?
I just was embarrassed. I thought it was going to create more of a commotion where more people were going to hear and see what was going on, these two men bickering.
And what was your intention?
My intention was I didn't want to contribute by yelling or shouting or trying to get his attention that way, so my intention was just to tap him on his shoulder or just to, it's not worth it, come on.
Okay. Now, we've seen the height difference between you two, right?
Yes,
All right.
Yes.
You were seated in your seat.
yes,
Your husband began to stand first, and then you followed with that process.
yes, but
I know we got to take it slow. It's almost painfully slow. I understand. But I'm trying to get two body movements and where they are in relation to one another. As your husband begins to stand, you began to do what with your left hand as you're coming out of your seat?
reach over, it's kind of awkward. It's kind of awkward, the seats. So I just, as I'm standing, I reach over, just to tap his arm or tap him.
Wherever you could touch him.
Right, my right arm was holding on and that's just what happened. It wasn't planned, that was what was natural.
As you're standing up, I want to know where your focus was. You get up. When you get up, are you turning your body looking one way, turning it looking the other way, or turning looking up at the screen? I'm trying to, when you get up.
Right, straightforward, facing the screen.
Can you see your husband peripherally where he is?
Yes,
Okay. But your focus is, as you're
as
getting
I'm
up.
standing up, it's straight ahead, and eventually I just turn my head to the right slightly, but my body does not really shift.
As you are standing up and your arm starts to move over, do you feel a sensation in your hand?
Yes,
Describe that sensation.
it felt like my hand was on fire, just fire. It felt like my hand was blown off.
At the time, contemporaneous, same time that you felt that sensation in your hand, did you hear a loud noise?
I did, yes.
Are you familiar with the sound of a firearm? Not on TV and all that stuff, but in real life.
Yes, limited, but yes,
But it was loud.
it was, yes.
Once you feel that sensation in your hand, do you continue your process of standing up?
Yes.
Can you tell us whether or not you're coming up off the seat bottom as you're coming up. Were your legs locked back when you felt the pain? Were you still, your knees not locked in that half-sitting position? I'm trying to get where you were.
It happened so fast, I was just in motion on my way up, probably pretty close to being fully up, but maybe not standing straight with my legs locked.
Okay. Once you heard the loud sound and you felt the burning sensation in your hand, do you continue to stand?
Yes.
Once you have finished the process of standing, what is your next observation?
Chad, he takes a couple steps and he collapses.
Are you concerned about your hand or your husband?
Oh, my husband, I knew he was way worse than me.
All right. Did you forego some immediate attention to your hand and concentrate on your husband for a short period of time?
Yes, yes, my focus was on him at that point.
We're going to take you back to the process of standing up out of the chair. You're standing up and you're coming up. From your peripheral vision or anything, do you get any sensation that your husband had extended his hand towards the row behind him and brought it back?
No,
Did you get anything, sensation from your peripheral vision that his body at all broke the plane of the back of the chair and reached over with his hand and then came back?
no,
When you finally had your hand in a position where you felt the burning pain, just prior to that, did your hand ever come in contact with consistent with someone leaning forward and coming back? You know, that oscillation of the hand. Did you ever feel that?
no.
Now, prior to the events that you just described, did your husband ever jump up and put his feet in the seat bottom of the seat?
No,
Did your husband use the F-bomb in any way directed towards the man that you recall
no,
prior to the sensation in your hand?
no,
Recall any statement to the effect, mind your own F business?
no,
Any statement at all, stay the hell out of my face,
no,
by your husband?
no,
Prior to the time that your hand had that burning sensation, were you aware that a bag of popcorn had been retrieved from behind you and tossed back into that area?
I was not aware, no.
As you're coming up out of your seat and Chad, preceded and coming up, is that the only time that he stood up?
The only time, yes,
The only time that he stood up, you were coming up with him.
yes,
That's it?
That's it.
Did you ever see your husband stand up and turn and face towards that area behind him?
Prior to the
Yeah,
shot?
prior to the sensation in
No,
your hand?
not prior to, no.
No, okay. Did you ever see your husband standing in his aisle, facing back towards the aisle, and do some type of motion?
No, not from where I was looking.
You knew that your husband had been hurt?
I did, yes.
Okay. You mentioned to us your concerns was towards him. Somehow, did you make your way down one row so that you could go to where your husband was?
Somehow I got down there, but I
It's all
assume I had to
blurred.
climb over the seat, but I don't recall how I got down there. But yes, I did get down out of the aisle.
Once you were on that aisle, were you able to obtain some type of wrap, bandage, something to put on your hand?
There was a gentleman that assisted me, yes.
At that point in time, did you see a gentleman sitting in the last row, up against the wall where the bistro was, that was directly behind your seat?
At that point of time, no.
Did there come a point in time when you did have an opportunity to see that individual?
Yes, I did.
And that individual was sitting in the seat right behind yours?
Correct.
When you saw that individual sitting in the seat right behind yours, did it appear to be a man of similar stature as you saw go down the aisle, leaving for the manager?
Yes.
And based on those observations and seeing where he was seated, did you have reason to believe that that was the man that was continually talking to Mr. Oulson and yourself?
And the color of his shirt, yes.
Now, if you see that man in the courtroom today, I'm going to ask you to point him out and describe what he's wearing for the court.
Yes. I was going to say the middle, but there's two gentlemen in the middle of this table here. It is the gentleman second to my right. He's wearing looks to be a grayish colored coat with a white shirt and a swirly tie, glasses, grayish hair at this table.
Your Honor, the record reflect, she's identified the defendant in this case, Curtis Reeves. At this time, I'm going to use various pieces of evidence that have already been admitted. I need about 2 minutes to set up the video and a poster board, if I may do that now. Thank you. on this side.
All right. What? You don't do that, did you?
Just that.
Just this one?
Of course, I've got to do that at least once today. Oh, okay. All right. Any witness okay on?
Yes. Do you have something on the screen?
I hope so.
Is it supposed to come up on the other screen?
You sure? Did someone turn that off?
I don't know, is it timeout?
Now I have it set on.
No signal?
I love technology.
Is it plugged in?
Yeah.
Hmm.
It is.
Well, I guess we can rearrange again.
What's that?
I guess we can rearrange again.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Let me just try to reset this and see if it.
Changed. Before it said DVD, oh, that's what it, now it says that again. I'll just rearrange.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Witness step down, Your Honor.
Yes.
Walk around, plus the wire. Feet on the X. All right, what I'd like to do is, we're gonna take you to where Mr. Reeves is. Do you see that part of the video?
Yes, I do.
Now, at that point, I'm gonna run it backwards just a little bit. As Mr. Reeves is walking in, at what point do you get a sensation that someone's behind you? Do you know?
When he leans forward and makes his
Okay.
very first comment.
All right. Let's go to that. Okay, you indicated the first presence is when you first felt the presence of someone behind. So if you would, let's bring Stacy to it. Let me walk around here. We're going to use this photo board so we can get an idea of where everyone seats is, okay? All right. Please show the jury what seat you were in. And the man behind you, what seat was he in? Okay. And your husband? All right, now, as you watch the video, as the gentleman leans forward, does he come right behind your seat or off to his right?
He comes right, his face appears to be right in here, so to my right and to Chad's left, right in here.
Okay. And the first contact is what? About the phone?
You need to turn your phone off.
Okay. There's a response?
What's your problem? Yeah.
And then we have coming back, and then within seconds, there's another contact.
Yes,
Now, again, the same positioning, leaning
right
in.
in here.
At that point, are you able to see out of your peripheral vision, the head coming into view?
No, just the first time.
All right. And the second time, the words were?
From
What-
Mr. Reeves?
Yeah.
The same, but you need to put your phone away.
In the same manner, tell them we discussed.
Yes.
Okay. Now, there's a point where he leaves.
Yes.
All right. what is going on during that time period? We have the two contacts. Is your husband still on the phone? When I say on the phone, I'm not talking. So the phone's still out?
Still out, I'm sure he's distracted from the phone, more focused on the conversation that he's having and been on his phone, but yes, it's still out, whether the screen timed off or what, I can't say, but yes.
Okay. Would you agree or disagree that your husband was just ignoring the man?
Blowing him off, I would agree.
We then have the third contact that you talked about. So as we watch the video, again, show us the direction in which Mr. Reeves is leaning towards your husband.
This seat in between me and Chad.
On this particular incident, out of your peripheral vision, are you able to see the man's head?
I don't see his head again now.
You just hear what? What do you hear the man say?
Do I need to go get management?
Is there a response by your husband?
Yes.
And what does he say?
Do what you need to do, or do whatever you feel you need to do.
You get the sense that he leaves?
Yes.
Now, as he is getting up, does he make any other comments?
Not that I'm aware of.
Does your husband make any other comments?
No.
Do you see him, do you turn and look and see the man leave at all?
No, not at this point.
And does your husband turn and look?
No.
There comes a point in time when he comes back, right?
Correct.
Now, we talked about this before as he's coming back. Do you know precisely at what point a comment is made by Mr. Reeves?
He's behind us, but I don't know if he's sitting or standing or what he's doing, I don't look.
As Mr. Reeves comes back and begins to take his seat, do you notice any type of body movement by your husband to his left, to his right, behind?
No, we don't move.
Okay. Exactly when the statement that Mr. Reeves, you don't know whether he was standing or sitting?
I do not know if Reeves was listening.
As we see Mr. Reeves come back, and this is camera 12, nothing by your husband at all
No?
as he's walking by?
No.
None. And as he takes his seat, he's going to take a seat right behind you? Yes?
Yes.
You mentioned to us that your husband stood up one time, and you were simultaneously going up with him.
A few seconds later, yes.
And as you're standing up is when you were shot.
Yes.
Do you ever see your husband standing and turning towards Mr. Reeves and throwing a cell phone?
No.
Do you hear any cussing, swearing, or F-bombs by your husband?
No.
All right. Do you recall any type of encroachment in your space by Mr. Reeves before your husband began to stand up?
No.
Okay. At this point is where you explain, or that both were mad, angry, frustrated.
Fair to say, it's hard to say what someone's feeling, but yes.
Yeah, you got the impression that these two guys,
Yes.
both of them were equally,
Yeah.
okay. There comes a point in time, like you said, when he stands up and you stand up with him. As you're standing up and you're beginning to reach over, we talked about whether or not you ever felt the oscillation of the hand, as someone's moving their body like this.
No, I did not. He was standing up.
All right.
Not really.
Were you aware of whether or not your husband, in fact, reached across the aisle behind him?
I was not aware of him.
All right. And that was the time that you were standing
I
up?
was facing forward and then I was looking to my right to Chad. I never looked behind me at that point.
At any time, did you hold, restrain, body hug, or whatever that would give someone the impression that you were holding someone back that was in a rage?
No, I had no need to. No.
When we talk about as you're getting up, as you're standing, when you hear the loud noise, that is when you feel the burning sensation in your hand.
Yes.
And you hadn't even gotten up out of your seat yet.
Just barely. I was
Right.
on my way up.
Once you were up, you knew that Chad was hurt?
Yes.
Let's talk about that. Using the poster behind you, show the jury where you were standing.
Where am I seated?
Okay. And where was Chad?
In front of the seat.
After you both began to stand up and you were fully standing, you knew you were hurt, you knew he was hurt. Where was he?
He was still here and starts stumbling down the aisle away from me.
Okay. And what are you doing at that point? Your hands burning?
Figuring out what happened. I knew a shot had rang out, but I didn't know where he was shot or what. really what our injuries were, other than my hand felt like it was gone off of my arm, and I'm watching him collapse, so I know it's bad. It's just shock, I think, panic.
Okay. Now, as you see your husband walking away, somehow it's a blur, you make it to the other eye.
Yes, I have. Get away from it.
I realize the concern, but did you make any phone calls as you were trying to contact anyone? What was going on that aisle below? You can show where it is, that aisle there. What were you doing before you made it to the end where you could see your husband?
Yes, a gentleman had helped me, gave me something, napkins, and something to wrap my hand. And I tried to contact my mother to let her know that something serious had happened and she needs to get over here. And I guess I'm not making sense. So the gentleman takes the phone and talks to my mother, and the same with Chad's mother. And then I knew I needed to get it together because I wanted to go see Chad and kind of figure out what was going on at the time. But I know from prior experiences that if he saw me panicking, he would be more worried about me. And I didn't want that, so I pulled it together enough to get back to him in front of him where I could look over the aisle at him on the ground. And I see his eyes were just glazed over, and I knew at that moment. But I tell him, Chad, and Lexi, need you, please hang in there, we need you. And then I started to lose it, so I walked back away from the scene, not the scene, but from where I could see him. And I went back to the gentleman that had been helping me.
Other people were helping your husband?
Yes, they were doing CPR or assisting.
Okay. Please take your seat. I have a moment.
Yeah, you done with the video?
Yes, I still have some more testimony.
Okay.
Oh, wait, let's see. Manny, could you help me with this, please, sir? Thank you. Yeah, I just got to kind of slowly. Approach the witness, Your Honor.
You may.
I'm going to show you a series of photographs, and the first one I show you is states marked for identification K, JPEG 2067296. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, I do.
Is that a photograph of you?
It is of me, yes.
All right. Taken a couple of days after this incident.
Yes.
Let me show you State's Exhibit Number L, marked for identification, JPEG number 2067299. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
Is that a photograph of the hand that you felt the burning sensation?
My left hand, yes.
Let me show you State's Exhibit number M, marked for identification. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
JPEG number 2067305. Is that your hand?
It is, yes.
And does that reflect the injury to your hand where you felt the burning sensation?
Yes.
Let me show you State's Exhibit number N as in Nancy, marked for identification, JPEG number 2067347. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
Is that a photograph of your hand?
Yes.
Taken the same time as the very first photographs we talked about?
Yes.
Let me show you State's Exhibit number O, marked for identification, JPEG number 2067344. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
Is that a photograph of your hand?
Yes.
And does it represent the injury as it was approximately 2 days after the incident?
Yes.
Let me show you State's Exhibit number P, marked for identification. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
All right, JPEG number 2067332. Does that photograph depict the injury to your hand approximately 2 days after the incident?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would move a series of photographs in order as State's Exhibits 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18.
Any objection?
No objection.
They'll be admitted.
May I publish?
You may.
We know that after this incident, you were treated. You were treated.
Yes.
All right. What did you finally realize happened to your hand?
That my finger was pretty much dangling and holding on just by a string, my ring finger.
All right. Were you taken to the hospital?
Yes.
Did you receive treatment?
I did, yes.
Did there come a point in time that the treatment included surgery?
Yes.
How long after the incident did you have surgery on your finger?
My best estimate is within a week or so after.
Okay. Do you know, I don't want to say what type of surgery, what did they have to do in order to repair your finger the best they could?
Well, the bone and everything in the finger was so destroyed that they had to take a chunk of bone from my wrist and put it in my finger in order to reconstruct it. So there are pins or metal bolts, not sure the correct terminology for them, that put my finger back together.
Okay. The injury that you received from your finger, at the time you received that injury, was your hand in front of your husband's chest?
It was, yes.
And he was injured by the same projectile?
Yes.
I know it sounds silly, but I'm going to ask you. You didn't consent to being shot in the hand, right?
No,
All right, so it was against your will.
it was, yes.
Let's talk a little bit about the injury itself. The mobility that you now have in your finger, is it the same as it was prior to January 13, 2014, or different?
Different.
How is it different?
Well, I've lost all movement in my top joint, and I've lost most of my movement and flexibility in my second joint, resulting in me not being able to grip things and just constant pain when I touch it the wrong way or hit it on something.
Let's talk about the way your finger looked prior to January 13th as opposed to after January 13th. Is there any difference in the way your finger looked after being shot.
Yes.
All right, and tell us how it's different.
It's crooked
Okay.
in multiple places. Again, scarred, lots of different tissue and scarring around it. Shorter, not as long as it was prior.
All right. We're going to direct your, may I publish these now, Judge?
You may.
I'm going to direct your attention now to the, I have 2 lights. We're doing that because of the shadow of the road. Before you is State's Exhibit number 13. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, I do. Yes, I
Who
do.
is that?
That's me.
Okay. Taken approximately 2 days after the incident?
Correct.
The white material on your hand, what is that?
Gauze.
Had surgery been performed at that point in time?
Not at this point.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 14. You give me a minute to orientate it. There we go. You recognize that photograph?
Yes, I do.
All right, is that a close-up of the hand and the bandaging?
Yes,
Again, before surgery?
yes.
Let me show you State's Exhibit number 15. Is that a photograph of your hand on top of a piece of gauze?
Yes.
Which finger was damaged?
My left ring finger?
Okay. And is that the way the injury appeared prior to your surgery?
Yes.
All right. And is it that injury that resulted from being shot on the 13th?
Yes.
Let me show you State's Exhibit number 16. You recognize that photograph?
Yes.
All right. Again, is that a close-up of the back of your hand?
Yes.
We see there's some red marks on the back side of your left hand. Prior to January 13th, 2014, did you have those red marks on the back of your hand?
No.
Let me show you State's Exhibit number 17. There you go. It's a photograph of your hand palm up, looking at your ring finger. Again, do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
And does that photograph represent the injury to your finger
Yes.
prior to surgery?
Yes.
And finally, State's Exhibit number 18. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
Again, it's a photograph palm up on a piece of gauze. Is that your ring finger?
It is, yes.
And does that represent the injury that you sustained from being shot on January 13th, 2014?
Yes.
Yeah. I have just a moment, counsel. Your Honor, at this time, may the witness step down and approach the jury box so that they can see the damage and the disfigurement to her finger.
All right. Yes, you may.
So what I'm going to ask you to do is kind of use these squares as your boundary marker, okay? And if you would just kind of do the shuffle and then show them your finger. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross.
I'd like to try to clear up so I understand the sequence of events inside the theater. Number one, Mr. Reeves tells Mr. Oulson something to the effect of turn off your phone, right?
Correct.
And at that point, Mr. Oulson blows Mr. Reeves off, right?
Yes, he says something back, but pretty much ignores, like,
Okay.
doesn't turn around to engage, just makes a comment over his,
Okay, so what is Mr. Oulson, I know you don't remember exact words for anyone, right? We can agree with that.
right.
What is your recollection of, not the exact wording, but what did Mr. Oulson say back? What was your impression of that?
What's your problem? The movie hasn't even started yet. Something about the lights, or, no noise being made.
Then there was a second request or conversation or at least communication concerning turning off the phone because it was still on, right?
Correct,
And that's from Mr. Reeves.
right.
And so what is Mr. Oulson's response?
Mind your own business.
And then at that point, by now, Mr. Oulson's beginning to get annoyed, right?
I'd say they both are.
Well, let's talk about that. Certainly you were familiar with Mr. Oulson, being his wife of 7 years.
Yes,
We can agree that you weren't familiar with Mr. Reeves at all, right? Having never met the gentleman before.
correct.
Okay. So for sure you knew that Mr. Oulson was annoyed, right?
Yes,
And then there was a communication, well, I guess I have to go to the manager, that sort of thing. Do I have that right?
correct.
Now, at that point, Mr. Oulson answers something to the effect of, well, do what you have to do.
Exactly, yes.
So between the second conversation at least and this one, Mr. Oulson is annoyed, right?
I'd say so, yes.
And certainly hearing I'm going to the manager also annoyed him, right?
Yes,
Now, when Mr. Reeves gets back, and I know you said it, that Mr. Reeves wasn't loud, right?
correct. They weren't whispering, but they weren't shouting either.
Right, because in your mind, whispering is the proper way to communicate in a movie theater.
That's mostly what you hear when you go, yes.
And so it wasn't loud in terms of Mr. Reeves, Mr. Reeves's voice.
Louder. Yes, I'd say it was kind of loud, yes.
Okay, so now you're saying it was loud. You know, previously you testified this afternoon that Mr. Reeves's voice wasn't loud.
Okay. And again, let me try to explain. In a movie theater, a whisper would probably be a normal voice that I would expect from people and that I would use. However, it was louder than that. So it was loud compared to what I would expect, but not shouting or screaming.
Louder than a whisper.
Yes. Somewhere in between, shouting and a whisper.
And so Mr. Oulson was also at the same level or higher than that?
I would say they were both the same.
Okay. Now, Mr. Reeves leaves, comes back, and now there's some more communication, correct? That's what you described.
Yes,
Now, at this point, Mr. Oulson has already been annoyed going into it when Mr. Reeves comes back and communicates to him, telling him something to the effect of, I see you put your phone away. Certainly, that made Mr. Oulson angry.
I can't speak to how he felt, but I would say that they had both been annoyed, angry, yes.
Well, now you're telling me you can't speak to how Mr. Oulson felt, but earlier you were able to tell me that a stranger that you never met before was annoyed. So was Mr. Oulson angry when Mr. Reeves came back and said, "I see you put the phone away. I'm sorry, I went to the manager"?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question again?
You're telling me that you don't remember or you don't know if Mr. Oulson was angry or not, but earlier you were able to tell that a stranger's annoyed, right? That's what you told me earlier.
Yes,
And so your own husband, when Mr. Reeves gets back and says something to the effect of, "I see you put your phone away, sorry, I went to the manager," Mr. Oulson is angry at that point, right?
I wouldn't say any angrier, but yes, I would say that they were same annoyance as, I couldn't see anything escalate in annoyance, but yes, I would say that he was probably annoyed and angry, just as Mr. Reeves appeared to me,
Well, again, Mr. Reeves didn't raise his voice, right?
and neither did Chad.
Okay, but you know Mr. Oulson, so you know when he's angry, right?
Yes,
You don't know Mr. Reeves,
No.
right? Okay. Now, at some point, there's, a kind of an escalation. I think that Mr. Oulson says something about, "What is your problem? I was checking on a message or checks for my daughter," something to that effect?
well, you say an escalation, but no, I would not categorize it as an escalation. I would say it was more of a de-escalation, but yes, he does make that comment.
Well, let's talk about that, because
Okay.
right about that time is when Mr. Oulson stands up in his seat and turns around, right?
Around that time, not at the exact time, I can't commit to, but around
All right.
that time.
So certainly, that's more than just blowing Mr. Reeves off, number one, right? You'll agree with me.
Yes, probably.
Number two, you'd agree with me, it's more than just talking back to Mr. Reeves to say, "What's your problem," right?
Say the words would be similar, yes.
Well, but now he's taking physical action, Mr. Oulson, right?
He stands up,
And he turns around, right?
correct?
And he turns around to look at, in the row, he's facing towards the road directly behind him,
Yes,
the row that Mr. Reeves is in,
yes,
with his wife, right?
yes.
Now, when Mr. Oulson gets up, he gets up fast. It's not a slow process, right?
It was standing up normally. I wouldn't say any faster than if I was to stand up out of my chair right now.
Okay, and he gets up. As he gets up, the back of the seat pops up, because that's how those seats go, right? You remember that?
I don't remember the seat popping up, no.
Okay. First, let's go back to the question before. So is your testimony today that Mr. Oulson did not stand up quickly and turn around?
He stood up, yes, quickly, but I wouldn't say he jumped up. It wasn't springing up out of his seat, it was standing up. And I think anybody can pretty much stand up quickly unless you're probably having trouble with a part of your body that keeps you from standing up.
Okay, like an older person maybe.
Right.
And so in this case, Mr. Oulson stood up quickly. You agree with me now?
I would say he stood up, yes.
Well, is he quickly or not?
I wouldn't categorize it as quickly, no. Just,
Okay.
well, that's hard to say. Yes, he stood up. It didn't take more than a second or two, so I would say that was quickly, yes, if that's what you're asking.
And I'm going to ask you again, the seat that you sit on popped up when he stood up.
I can't say that I saw it pop up, no.
Okay, it's page 823 of the previous court proceeding, line 19. I'll strike that question, Your Honor. So in this case, we agree Mr. Oulson stood up and he's facing Mr. Reeves and Mrs. Reeves towards their back row, right?
Correct.
And it's at that point you describe that you are starting to get up at the same time?
Shortly after, Chad, not at the exact same time, no.
Okay, shortly after. And during that time, you say you try to get Chad's attention, Mr. Oulson's attention?
Correct.
Okay. And you were doing that by telling him it's not worth it?
No, I did not say anything to him. That's what I was thinking in my head, but I went to tap him to, let him know that, hey, focus on me, it's not worth it. But I did
All right.
not say those words, I don't believe,
Now, you're showing me that you tapped him with your left hand,
in my left hand.
and because Mr. Oulson is to your right.
Yes.
And so for some reason, you're not using your right hand, right?
Correct.
Okay. You'll agree with me that your right hand was closer to Mr. Oulson than your left hand.
Yes,
Okay. And when you pointed in the board here, you were using the pointer with your right hand,
I'm right-handed, yes.
but for some reason you chose to use your non-dominant hand to reach across your body to get Mr. Oulson's attention. That's your testimony.
Yes,
And to get his attention, you didn't tap him on the shoulder, right?
I didn't have a particular place in mind. It just was a natural reaction. Yes, I would probably think that his shoulder would be where I would try to get, but
And
didn't
so-
end up there.
And we know what happened, so your reaction turned to be to somehow position your left hand between Mr. Oulson, Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, right?
Yes,
Now, you saw the video that the prosecutor showed you. You were standing here.
yes,
Now, there was one part in the video, it was at, and I know you didn't write down the numbers, it was 13:26:25. In that image, it appears that Mr. Oulson is coming across the aisle, because in that frame, you can see his head and his arm. Your testimony today is you didn't see any of that.
correct.
Well, he was standing next to you, facing the row behind him. You had your hand out to touch him. Did you feel Mr. Oulson move at all?
No, I did not.
You can't deny that you saw a figure in the frame going forward, correct?
That is correct.
The next time, it's about 10 seconds away before we see the popcorn grab. That's something else that you say that you did not see, right?
I thought we were just talking about the popcorn.
There was a frame at 13:26:25 that was 10 seconds before the popcorn grab.
Okay.
And the prosecutor stopped it right on that frame. Do you not remember that?
I remember the arm coming out and the popcorn being reached and then the popcorn being thrown. So maybe the numbers are throwing me off.
Well, that was 10 seconds later, so there was something that happened before
Okay.
that's real quickly visible.
I mean, we're just throwing out frame numbers, 13:26. He wants to show it to her, play it. Ask her. I mean, she can't, she
Yeah.
doesn't know frame by frame.
Okay, let me ask you a question then. Let's say, hypothetically, that there's a 10-second gap between Mr. Oulson reaching into the back row towards Mr. and Mrs. Reeves and Mr. Oulson reaching again back there to grab the popcorn. What were you doing for that time period? After Mr. Oulson stood up, what were you doing?
I can't speak to 10 seconds, but I noticed him standing. It drew my attention, just kind of waiting to see what was happening. And then I started to stand up. I'm looking up as I'm standing in front of me. And then I look over to him to tap him. I never look back here any further. I never turned my body around. My feet never moved. My head looked at Chad as I was going to tap him, but I never turned around and saw anything behind me.
Okay, so as you're looking at Mr. Oulson, you don't see him lean over
I do not know
at any point in time?
at any point.
after the firearm was discharged, we can agree that Mr. Reeves didn't say anything.
I did not hear anything, no.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, and I'm going to need to play the video. We have that framed.
Do it quickly, please. Do it as quickly as you can, please.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
He gave us the number, so. I'm-
Okay, gotcha.
Just take me a few minutes.
Okay. We're all aware of how long it will take. We've seen you a couple times now. It's not that bad, it's okay, just,
I practice.
yes.
Yeah, Your Honor.
I will too, in just a second. I'm waiting to see if maybe it comes on this time. Doesn't look like it. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, real quick, I have to see everything that you guys do, which is why I've been repositioning. We all have to see everything.
Is it up on your screen?
I messed up my screen. I turned it off, and it didn't come back on where it was supposed to, but I can see it up there. See, I do it too.
Okay. May the witness step down now?
She may. Make sure all the jurors can see, please.
On cross-examination, Mr. Michaels asked you about a particular segment, 1326. He used the 25. Let's go ahead and take you to that point. And what I'd like to do, you indicated to us that's where Mr. Reeves sat down. At some point, it's when the comment was said. All right. Now, at some point, you told us that Chad stood up,
Yes, one time.
and you stood up with Zach simultaneous almost with him.
A couple seconds later, yes.
And then that's when you were shot.
Yes.
Okay. At 13:26:25, let's go back this way. See where your husband is? Okay? All right. He only stood up once, correct?
One time.
All right. And that one time that he stood up, within seconds you were shot.
Yes, correct.
That's it.
That's it.
And that was here.
That's the one.
You did not see the popcorn.
I did not.
You know he's standing there,
Yes, I'm standing up.
okay? And you did not see this.
I did not.
All right. But what you do know is you never felt the oscillation.
Right, he was standing up when I reached over to tap him. He was not moving forward or backwards.
All right. And then you were shot.
Correct.
What is the time period from the time that you were standing up to when you were shot? Is it 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 second, 2 seconds?
Seconds.
Just-
Seconds, I mean, get out of your seat.
And shot?
Did it.
Shot.
However many seconds that is. 2,
Okay.
3.
All right. And you don't know where Mr. Michaels was referring to at 13:26:25. Here, where you see, you weren't shot there.
No, all I see is Reeves.
All right. And see your husband?
No, not at that
Okay.
point.
All right, that's fine. If you don't see it, you don't know it.
No.
All you know is you stood up and you got shot.
Right.
Okay.
So when I was speaking to the popcorn, which was not at this.
No further questions.
Back up.
May this witness be released? Do you want her on standby? What?
She'll be here, so she'll be on standby. Fine.
And counsel approach on that? Thanks, everybody. Well done. Yeah. Huh? I'm gonna wait. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of the day for today. Thank you for your attention all day. It's been another long day. I would like to start at 8:30 tomorrow, and, but Madam Clerk just indicated to me that I guess you have a few things to do in the morning before you get here. So if you guys could be here at like 10 after 8, quarter after 8, and take care of business with them, and then we'll do our best. We're all here on time, but there's a lot of times that things come up, as you've undoubtedly seen in the last 6 days you've been with us, that we have to discuss outside your presence. So my instruction, I never know how long that's going to take, but we definitely try not to waste a minute of your time unnecessarily. So please remember my instructions during the recess. No independent research, no talking about the case, and report to the jury pool room by about 8:10, 8:15, and we will get started at 8:30. And Deputy Martin does have, she has the clerk's daily letter for each of you, and then those of you who requested a letter from me. If I missed anybody, just, you can, I can't get it tonight, I don't think. But if I miss anybody, I don't think I did, but if I did, just hang out in the jury pool room and I'll double check and I'll type you something tonight, okay? Other than that, you'll be in recess till tomorrow morning. Thank you, everybody.
All rise for the recess. We'll be here in the morning. Everything's taken care of.
Thank you, everybody. Well done. See you in the morning.